As an individual agent, have you ever felt too busy to actually grow your business? In other words, are you working too much in your business instead of on your business? Well, we have a solution for you. Stay tuned. This episode of Keeping It Real is brought to you by Real Geeks. How many homes are you going to sell this year? Do you have the right tools? Is your website turning soft leads into interested buyers? Are you spending money on leads that aren't converting? Well, Real Geeks is your solution. Find out why agents across the country choose Real Geeks as their technology partner. Real Geeks was created by an agent for agents. They pride themselves on delivering a sales and marketing solution so that you can easily generate more business. Their agent websites are fast and built for lead conversion with a smooth search experience for your visitors. Real Geeks also includes an easy-to-use agent CRM. So once a lead signs up on your website, you can track their interest and have great follow-up conversations. Real Geeks is loaded with a ton of marketing tools to nurture your leads and increase brand awareness. Visit realgeeks.com/keepingitrealpod and find out why realtors come to Real Geeks to generate more business. Again, visit realgeeks.com/keepingitrealpod. And now, on to our show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I'm your guide and host through the show. And in just a moment, we're going to be speaking with Nikki Miller. Before we get to Nikki, just a couple of quick reminders. By the way, we had our very best month ever in our podcast as far as number of downloads last month, which would have been June. And we are so thankful and grateful to everybody who has listened, who tells a friend about this episode, and who continues to come back. And so thank you. We are so honored to serve you. And please continue to tell other agents in your office and other agents you meet who just might get some value from listening to top producers like Nikki here in just a few moments. So just wanted to make that announcement, guys. We're really doing great, and we're so thankful to you. So let's get on to it. Let the main event, my conversation with Nikki Miller. Hey, today our guest on the show is Nikki Miller of Lever by Movoto. Now, let me tell you more about Nikki. Now, Nikki Miller is the founder and CEO of formerly the Lead Syndicate and now Lever by Movoto, which is a first-of-its-kind leverage platform exclusively optimized for individual real estate agents, supporting partners in hundreds of locations across the United States. Nikki built this renowned platform using over a decade of her unique experience in real estate, coaching, training, and high-level systemization and integration. Nikki's passion for real estate, for a real estate agent's success is evident in everything she touches, from the ideation of this innovative support system for agents to the countless free resources she provides, also to the many real estate events you can see her training at throughout the year. Nikki is also the host of the One Thing podcast that has reached over 11 million listeners worldwide. Huge. Please, to learn more about Lever, you're going to go to lever.movoto.com, and that's lever.movoto.com. I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes. Please check that out, and we're going to learn more about what Lever does. Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
First of all, the One Thing podcast, huge. You guys are big. I know what our numbers are. And you guys are even. I mean, you should be big, right? You've got the main guy. Sort of this idea of having such access to you've really built a really amazing podcast. I'm very grateful to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be. I can't take all the credit. It's been around for a really long time.
It
I'm
has.
certainly not the originator of it. And
no, but
it's a joy to get to be a part of.
Well, Millionaire Real Estate Agent is still, I think, just about the best book out there to get started. And of course, the One Thing as well. So yeah, you're in good, obviously great company there. And so we're so happy that you're in our company. But tell us a little bit first, let's start with you. What's your background? How did you get started in real estate?
So I found an interesting sideways way into real estate as many do, and the sort of theme that got me there was this idea that I could control my own destiny. I actually started when I went to college. What I thought I wanted to do was work in sports broadcasting. And that's actually what I went to college for. And by a long story and complete stroke of luck, I got a job working for the NFL when I was literally a kid. I was like 18 years old when I had my first season with them. And I got a job as a sideline reporter. Originally, I was intended to just go and kind of like shadow and build my reel, and got to actually work with alongside the team and on the sideline. And I did that for 3 seasons, so 3 years, and it was an incredible experience. Like if there was any training I could force along to a young person, it would be that the ability to ask questions, the ability to interview, the ability to get the interview, the ability to be in an environment where you feel like you're the youngest person there and maybe a little unqualified, maybe actually unqualified. And it was just such an incredible experience for me. But I realized pretty quickly that I liked it, I didn't love it. And I was taking the seat, so to speak, of someone who would love it, someone who would be enormously grateful to be there. And what I also didn't love is that there was so many sort of outlined steps, and there was so much red tape, and there was so much, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. And my personality style just raged against that. Like it did not fulfill what I wanted to do. And the number one thing that I knew I wanted was financial freedom and business freedom. And so I was still in college at the time, and I went to the library one day and I went to the biography section, and I started pulling down all these books of people who were really successful. Frankly, a bunch of like older white men that had been really successful. And I said, well, what's the one thing that they all have in common? And guess what it was? Well, it was real estate, right? And business ownership. And I thought, well, I went on a quest then to figure out what could I do that entailed both. And that brought me to real estate. And I started my real estate career on the development side. So I actually started on sort of the more finance side. I was an underwriter for a real estate investment and development firm. And then ended up my husband, boyfriend at the time, husband now, got transferred to Northern California. I was living in LA at the time. And so I followed him there, and ended up not really wanting to start the process over of working for another development firm. And also, I knew that the runway was going to be really long in order to get to where I wanted to go. And once again, sort of this theme that I wanted to be able to control my destiny, I wanted to be able to build something for myself, kept coming up. And I thought, well, where can I do that? And by the way, I'm 22 years old at the time in a brand new area that I don't know anybody. And what I didn't know at the time was one of the most challenging real estate markets in the country, in the Bay Area. And so I said, "Well, I think I'll go be a real estate agent." And that's what I went on and did. And that sort of started my journey into the space of real estate.
Wow. And so you're 22and you're like, "Hey, I need to take control." I mean, it's such a you were just so far ahead of me at 22. I try to think of I was just happy to be gainfully employed and out of college but you, interestingly enough, you talked about working for the NFL. I worked out of college. I worked for Anheuser-Busch, and I was really grateful for that. And I toured around the country doing marketing things for them. And what I learned from them was, and they had a real dedication to sort of perfection,
Yeah.
and or at least as close to perfection as their products can get. And then that's maybe a debatable topic, but to them, they had certain
Yeah.
standards that were really higher than other brands at that time, and probably still are. And I'm curious, the NFL has a similar thing, right? They
Yes.
have a certain level of professionalism
Yep.
and broadcast standards and journalism standards. And I'm assuming some of that probably came with you, and you're like, oh, this is how the big players do it.
Oh
And then
yeah.
you were able to take that out into the real world. What when you so now you're 22, you're like, I want to do this other thing. How did you get started doing that? In a tough environment, a tough market, a tough city. How did you start your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thematics for what I would later do in my real estate business were there. As the Stoics say, the obstacle is the way, and I can very much say that every obstacle that I faced in my real estate career ended up being instrumental in my success later. And had I not had been faced with that, I don't know that I would be talking with you
Sure.
today. And so early on, I mean, I remember when I started, the sort of number one piece of advice that still to this day, right? Like real estate hasn't changed that much. I always say when people ask me, well, what's different from when you started? I say nothing and everything. Nothing in the sense that how they advise you to get started and how they advise you to build your business isn't any different. And by the way, that's not a bad thing, right? The principles of how to be successful in real estate haven't really changed. The market, however, and how to access the consumer and the rules of real estate, that's all changed, right? And so it's sort of this dichotomous industry in that way. But when I started, the number one piece of advice was, well, go and talk to your sphere of influence. Like that's how you went and built your business. It was go
Sure.
talk to all your friends, go talk to the people in your database. And I'm 22 and brand new to the area. Like
And
number
none of your
one,
friends are buying homes in San
exactly.
Francisco at 22, right?
Exactly, like, even if I did have friends there, which I didn't, that none of them could afford homes,
Right.
and I knew nobody, like, I literally knew no one, and so, that advice just didn't work for me, so I was required to sort of rethink this idea of how to be successful, and the way that I did it was, I built my whole business door knocking, so I literally was out there
Wow.
every single day door knocking, and by the way, in this process, I got all the sort of like vitriol that a young person in our industry can get, which was again, I'm in the most one of the most challenging real estate markets in the country. And I'm 22 and brand new, and everybody's like, "There, good luck, kid. Like, there's no way that you're going to be able to build what you want to build here. You're too young. You don't know anybody. You don't have any like friends. Blah blah blah." And I just said, all right, well, if all of that is true, then it's just going to require that I rethink how to be successful. So I don't. I wish I had like a Cinderella story of my first year. I don't. I wasn't successful really fast, which I also think was quite a gift for me. Um, I door knocked my first year in real estate. I door knocked 356 days that year. 356 days. The only
Wow.
days that I took off was because I also got married that year. And that was literally the only time that I took off. But I door knocked every single day and I sold a sum total, a grand total from January to December. I started in January of one house that year. And it
Yeah.
wasn't even from door knocking. It was from doing an open house. And so I looked up and realized that when I started studying, one thing I've always been really good at, a theme in my life has been that I'm just a student and I'm perpetually a student. And I watch what other people are doing. Again, I'll go back to the story of me being in college of like, I didn't need to go and figure out how to be successful. It's like successful people have lived before me. Let me just go figure out what they did and I'll just go model it. And so when I looked at all the people who were really, really successful in our industry and in my area, the one thing they all had in common was time. That was really it. Like the one thing that they all had in
Yeah.
common. Yes, some people were from there. Some people had done different types of lead generation, but the one commonality they all had was time. That they had been in the business for a long time. And I was like, I looked up and said, okay, well, I've only been in it for a year. I've only been at this for a year. And I made a deal with myself that I'm going to keep doing what I believe is the right thing. And if in 3 years I'm not successful, then I'll rethink it. Like if in 3 years I've actually put my best foot forward and I've actually put the most amount of effort into this that I could, then I'll start to rethink it. And by the way, I was like, well, in 3 years I'm only going to be 25. Like I got a lot of life in front of me, so I might as well. And one of the things a lot of people that I meet, especially young people, are worried that their youth is going to work against them. And I always say the beauty that young people have that I think you lose as you get older is that you're just like so young and stupid that you don't know any better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, you just don't know any better, and so many other people would have quit, and I was like, "Well, I don't have anything better to do, might as well," right? And so I said that was my deal with myself. I said, "If in 3 years I haven't made any progress and I'm still knocking doors every day and not being successful, then I'll quit and I'll find something else. There's lots of other things I could do." So the first year I was, entirely unsuccessful, but the second year, compound interest hit. And because of all the work that I had done in that first year, I ended up the second year in business. So I'm 23, being the number one agent, individual agent in our office.
Wow.
And that was how I did it. And like I said, it didn't happen quickly, which I think was a gift for me. I often actually sympathize for people who in any business, right? But we're talking about real estate on this podcast, but in any business that are really successful really fast because it's just so rare and it rarely sustains. And you lose the ability to problem solve and work through challenges, and you lose the ability to stick with it when it's really hard. And I think that was just such a gift for me.
Yeah, they call it the gift of desperation, right? Like the gift
Yeah,
of just going, "Hey, I'm just going to do this thing, and
yeah,
other people have done it, so I don't see why I couldn't." I will say though, door knocking, it probably sent shivers down the spines of a lot of our listeners when you said that, because it seems so counterintuitive. Well, it just does. If we don't look, the average person doesn't like to their door not to be knocked upon. That being said, here you are in your second year being the number one agent, so the results were there. Um,
yeah.
what did you learn from door knocking?
Well, what I learned was that, foremost, what I learned is that how you communicate your reasoning for being there is everything. Because you're absolutely right. People don't like to be disturbed for no reason.
Sure.
So you have to come up with some type of value, and you have to be of value to the consumer, right? I've long said, it's an interesting phenomenon happening in real estate right now, given the changes that are happening in the industry because of the changes within NAR and the recent ruling.
Mhm.
Everybody's all of a sudden like, yeah, we should really figure out our value proposition. I'm like, why are we just now figuring that out? Y'all should
because
have had that
because
figured out
because nobody
a
had
long
to
time
do
ago.
that. We didn't.
Exactly.
Exactly. And you did, because when you're knocking on a door, you better have something of value to say, because you got about 4 seconds, right? And I'm
Yes.
guessing, I'm going to guess at your value proposition, and tell me if I'm wrong, because it's the only thing that I could think of that might possibly work is, hey, I think your home is appreciated, or I would love to give you an updated, estimate on what I think your home is worth today. Was it some version of that?
It So I had a series. So I'll give this to anybody who wants to go out and door knock because that's a great one. But to me, it felt a little too quick to the
Yeah,
punch.
it is a little
And
quick. Yeah,
right, and what I wanted was to build an actual relationship. I
yeah,
intended to build relationships with these people because what's interesting about the place that I chose to door knock. A lot of people were like, "Well, you could have farmed," because in my head, I knew we talked about the Millionaire Real Estate Agent before we
yeah,
jumped on,
yeah.
and in that book, they talk about leads, listings, leverage, right? And so I knew that in order to grow a big business, I had to go out and get listings. But most people were getting listings when I was listening to where people were getting their business from. Most people were getting listings from their sphere of influence or
Sure.
from their past clients or from whoever. I'm like, I don't have any of that, right? So I thought to myself, well, where can I go that people own homes and would want to list with me? And door knocking was
Go
literally the only
straight
thing
to
I
their
could
home.
come up with. Exactly. Because I couldn't afford to, I was so early in the business and
Yeah,
I didn't have any money. I couldn't
sure.
afford to do farming or anything like that. So I walked and farmed. And the place that I chose, there had been an agent, and I remember everybody telling me, don't try and farm this area. Don't try and door knock this area. It's been the same agent in there for the last 30 years, and
Yeah,
she owns the place.
sure.
And I watched her and I would go to her open houses and she did. She was like the mayor. She knew everybody, but she wasn't door knocking and she wasn't providing any value. And all she did was continue to list homes, which is of course valuable, but she wasn't adding anything else. And I thought to myself, okay, well, if I can provide more, if I can get in closer connection, well, then at least I'm going to be another option for them. Because what if somebody doesn't want to work with that person or doesn't want to go that route? And so what I did was I just started by meeting everybody. And my opening script was, "Hey, I'm Nikki. I'm your local realtor. We haven't had the opportunity to meet yet. I know this because I've never door knocked this area, right? We haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, and I'm going to be coming by every 3 weeks or so. Do you promise to open the door for me when I come by?"
That's a
And
great. I love that.
and that was it. And then I would leave, and everybody was like, "You didn't ask for the business. You didn't do that." And I said,
Smart. No, that's really
Exactly.
smart.
I didn't need to. I just needed to start the relationship. And the biggest thing is that I needed to uphold my promise because the biggest objection that I had to handle was that I was 22 years old, right? Like, and people were worried that I was somebody who behaved like a 22-year-old,
Sure.
right? And so I showed them through my consistency that I was actually who I said I was and that I would do what I said I was going to do. And then I just would go through a series of value, 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 and then make the ask. But even the ask was still value, right? If the listeners haven't read Jab, I think it's Jab, 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 Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk, really similar to the sort of cadence that I put out. And it was really just me going to their door every 3 weeks, just like I promised, and saying something of value, right? It was, yes, here, do you want to market analysis, or do you want to know what's been happening in the neighborhood? Or
Yeah.
hey, I just referred a landscaper to your neighbor. Do you need anybody like that?
Gotcha.
And then eventually I would get their information by saying, hey, I send out a monthly newsletter. Your neighbors are all on it. Would you want to be in on that list? And I would get their info. And then all of a sudden they were in my database. And it happened, I always say slowly and then all at once. Like it took a long time to get to that point, and then all at once, I took over that neighborhood because I was the agent who was out there doing the things to provide value. And the most important thing that I did, the most important thing I did, which I think I see a lot in the world of real estate, is that I didn't stop,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
many people stop
They get
after
right
the
to the
success
edge. They
comes.
don't see that they're right there because they can't see it. They just don't, they give up because they like, well, I tried it. It didn't work. Yeah.
Yes, or they do this thing that makes them really successful. They do open houses, or they cold call, or they door knock, or whatever it is, and then they get successful and
Right.
they stop. It's
Sure.
the craziest thing. And so it's ultimately, I think the success was predicated on doing the things and not giving up, but also continuing to do the things after they started working.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things too that our listeners can probably identify with, which is realtors, of course, have to wear all these different hats, and
Yeah.
once you start getting busy, you start associating working with my current clients as busy, which it is, and it can take up an entire day servicing, one client or two clients, and then all of a sudden, a weeks go by and you haven't done any prospecting because
Yep.
you were busy doing. Brian Buffini talked a lot about this. Was like carve out an hour every day
Yeah.
for lead generation or at least developing better relationships with your sphere. Do that every hour. Do that 1 hour every day. And if you don't do that, you sort of lose the day, even though you may have been busy from 9 to 5 helping an existing client.
100%. And that's sort of what started the ideation for what I do now, because that's exactly what happened to me. So I was sort of hitting my ceiling of achievement in exactly that way. And I at least had a good head on my shoulders around lead generation, because I knew that was, there was no luck in any of my success. It was like pure unadulterated hard work, right? And so I knew that if I stopped doing those things, that the results would go away, right? And I saw all this compound interest happening and I didn't want it to slow down. But then I would look around me at the other individual agents and I saw sort of the business roller coaster that they were on. Right. And so I looked up and I said, okay, well, I don't want to be on that roller coaster. So I went into my manager's office one day and I said, hey, like I've hit my ceiling. I have
I
more
Yeah.
clients than I can handle. Right. And I don't know what to do now, because I don't want to stop lead generating, but I literally don't have time. I'm
Yeah.
doing all of the things, I'm managing all of the things, and I don't want to be on the roller coaster. Help me get off. And she said, okay, well, now here's what we do next. We're going to get you a coach, and we're going to teach you how to hire people, and we're going to teach you how to fire people. We're going to teach you
Right.
to be HR and take on all this overhead and
Now
build
you're now you
systems
have
and do
another
marketing.
job.
Yeah, and that's literally what I said. I was like, "Wait a minute. I came in here because I'm out of time, and this sounds like another job. This sounds like a whole 'nother job." At the time, my husband was working for a really big company, and I was like, "He has an HR person that does this, and a finance person that does this, and a marketing person that does this, right?" And I was like, "I don't wanna do all of that. I'm one person." And she said, the famous words I hear in real estate all the time, "Well, this is the way it's always been done." And so I tried it that way. And mind you, at the time, I sort of raged against this anyway because I'm 23 years old, right? Like in my head, I'm like, I have a goldfish that I'm responsible for. Like, I don't want to be responsible for another human's livelihood, right? And I just resisted the idea of having to take on this overhead and having to take on the responsibility of managing someone and building all of it, because I actually love real estate. Like, I really love the process of selling real estate, and that's just what I wanted to do. And I really raged against having to build out these systems and hire people and manage this overhead and all these other things. I didn't, at the time, I really didn't want to be a part of the business side. And so I tried it and did not do well. Once again, not a Cinderella story. Like I felt flat on my face. And so I went back in her office 6 months later and said, "Hey, thanks so much for all these classes and for the coach and all these things, but I don't want to do any of this. Like somebody before me has figured this out and I would really like to just pay them to do it. And she said, you can't do that. That doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And I said, well, then what are my options? She said, well, you could join a team. And in order to join a team, it would mean putting my production under them, putting my business under them. And it wasn't a financial model I was a big fan of. So I said, no, no, I don't want to do that. And by the way, this is a long time. This is, a long time ago now. So at the time, teams were still in early iterations. Like they were
Hmm.
really just a bunch of people connected by one person's credit
Sure.
card. Like they didn't know what they were doing
They
either.
were pooling
And
production, and that was basically
yeah,
it. And pooling
exactly.
leads, and yeah.
Exactly, which today they've evolved. Some are still that, but today they've evolved a bit. And but I was very clear at the time, I don't want any part of that. And also, I had built a great brand for myself. And most people get into the real estate business for the same reason that I did. They want to control their own results. And I said, well, if I go work for a team, then I'm right back where I started, right? We're effectively working for someone else again.
Oh, and even if you're hiring somebody as an individual like assistant, if they're not up to the standard of your brand, and if they're, yeah, it can be now you're managing that person, or you're managing the team, or you have to lower your expectations or whatever. Yeah.
There you
You lose
go.
control.
Exactly. And so I was like, "Nope, definitely don't wanna join a team." And she said, "Okay, then you gotta do it yourself." I was like, "Nope, definitely don't wanna do that." Tried that, hated that. And I said, "Well, if I don't wanna build it myself and I don't wanna join a team, what are my options?" She smiled at me and she said, "Then you just stay where you are." And what she didn't have to say is that I would suffer the consequences of staying where I was. And as someone who is very ambitious and very growth oriented, the idea like that was the nail in the coffin. There was nothing she could have said to me that would have been more effective than that, and she didn't even do it knowingly.
Right.
And so sort of by force, I ended up building it out myself. What I found out in the process of building it out for myself is that my special skill in business is actually operations and scale and systems. And I built a very successful expansion team through California and then became the CEO of what at the time was one of the largest brokerages in California. And it was there that I realized that this was the challenge that I had had as an individual was not unique to me. In fact, every individual agent ever was going through the same challenges, the same ceilings, and they would come into my office and guess which options I would give them. I would say, well, you can build it yourself, you can stay where you are, or you can join a team. And that was it. Those were the options that the industry was giving us. And I felt at one point I remember looking at myself. I had a really hard conversation with an agent who was a lot like me, who was a really hard worker, became successful, loved real estate, and just really didn't want to join a team, but didn't want to build it themselves. And she looked at me and she said, Nikki, somebody's got to figure out a better way. Like this is madness. And I don't want to stay where I am. I don't want to build it myself and I don't want to join a team. And you promised me by coming to this brokerage and being my leader that you would help get me to where you want to go. And you are breaking that promise.
Mm,
And it was like a knife to the gut.
yeah.
And from an integrity standpoint, like I remember walking to the bathroom after that in tears and looking in the mirror and saying, "She's right." Like I made a promise as a leader that I would figure out the best way forward for our people. That's your job as a leader, right? And I realized in that moment I absolutely wasn't upholding it. And so I left that position in late 2020 and just gave myself some space to rethink what I had been doing and how the industry had been approaching this because late 2020 is also when a lot of people were coming up with ideas about teams, right?
Sure.
How to better support teams, how to better create systems for teams. But I thought to myself, teams are still to this day the minority percentage, and people who are on teams are still the minority percentage of the people who make up the real estate industry. So what are we doing for everybody else?
Yeah.
And so I looked up and said, okay, well, what was I asking for? And what was everybody else asking for? Like, what are we looking for? And so I remember writing up on the board what we wanted was all the economies of scale, all the support, all the benefits, all the infrastructure of having a team around us. But what we didn't want was we didn't want to give up our brand, we didn't want to give up our production, we didn't want to be under a team. And alternatively, we didn't want to have to take on a bunch of overhead because it turns out it doesn't work out so well when you tell your assistant I can't pay you this month because I didn't get paid, right? And so we didn't want to take on a bunch of overhead and we didn't want to have to manage it ourselves because that takes us away from what matters most in real estate. And the industry said, no, you can't do all that. That's impossible. You can't have all that. So that's what I went out and built. So the original company that I launched in January of 2021 was called the Lead Syndicate, which was very simply a leverage platform designed specifically for individual agents. And what I put together was all the areas that I knew that agents needed support: coaching and training, database management, marketing, transaction management, and supplemental lead generation. And I was very clear that the industry was not, is not, and likely never will be in need of any more tools. Like we
Right.
just and I like
Right.
take that meaning in the multifold that it could be. But like we just don't need any more tools. We are not in need of a single more tool in this industry. No agent is suffering because they don't have enough tools. What they are suffering from, the challenge that they are facing is that they need somebody to do it for them. They are out of time, out of energy, out of
Or
money, whatever it may be.
or they're just not good at that particular thing.
There you go. Or they don't wanna do it, or
Right.
they're just like me, and, like, maybe they are really good at it, but they just quite simply don't want to, amongst all the other million things that they have to do, and therefore, they're not gonna get the compound interest in their business. They're because what I tell agents is that these things still have to be done. Like, you can rage against them, but they do still have to be done. The rules of success are not changing, right? But the challenge is most agents make the decision to do all the things that matter least at the expense of what matters most.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're on the roller coaster or why their business isn't growing. And I say, well, because you're doing all these things that do matter, but they don't matter more than this most important thing,
But
right?
there's only one of you, so you're now having to balance walk that
So you're
tightrope, and it's
constantly having to
almost
make that
impossible.
choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. And so I built this leverage platform. And what I anticipated, and at first everybody told me, they were like, Nikki, this is crazy. First of all, nobody builds things for individual agents.
Yeah,
There's a reason.
exactly. That which
Um,
I love. Yeah.
yeah, and so they were like, "Don't." I literally had mentors, some of the smartest minds in real estate, who looked at me and said, "Don't do this. It's going to fail."
Well, also too,
And
like another thing that people say is individual agents don't spend money on tools and
mhm,
products outside of what they're given at their brokerage. Teams do.
right,
We know teams do, but that was another hurdle
yeah.
is yeah,
Which is true, by the way, but again, it's not because they're cheap or because they don't wanna spend money. I think that's the biggest challenge
yeah,
that I've seen in real estate, and I think this comes from, again, all the challenges I face and all the things I've done really led to sort of the perfect summation of the ability to build this out. Because I have a habit in the real estate industry when someone tells me I can't do that, or they say, "This fact is true." I'm a trained reporter. Like, I'm gonna ask, what makes that true? Tell me more about that. How do you know that that's true? And you're right. A lot of people said to me that exact phrasing of individual agents don't spend money. And my question was, is it that they don't spend money or is it that they don't want to take on overhead? Because
right,
I think what it is that they don't want to take on overhead, which I understand because I was
sure,
just like that, right? I remember on the months that go really well, sure, I'll pay. But the months that go really badly, I've got a family to take care of, right? And so I don't want to expend a bunch of money. And I understood that. And I still understand that. And so I looked up and I basically said, from a financial standpoint, too, how do we build something that makes our success intertwined? Because the other challenge that I had is that I had paid for a lot. I was not afraid to spend money in my real estate business, probably too much so, and was not watching my money. And I paid for a lot of things that were a great deal for the company that sold them to me and not a great deal for me. Right. And
right, sure,
so I said, in building this model, I said, I don't want to succeed unless our agents succeed. Like, integrity is literally my number one value. And I literally would not be able to sleep at night if our agents weren't winning and I was. Like, it just quite
sure.
simply would not have worked for me. So I said, well, I'm going to partner with them because I believe in this model so much that I will make our success predicated on their success. And once again, everyone was like, you're a lunatic. You've absolutely lost it. Like, this is absolutely not going to work. Nobody builds things for individual agents. And by the way, there's no way you can scale a do it for you model of this extent and this size.
And you're in a super crowded marketplace of a million other tech providers or lead generation providers because you're hitting like five different things, which are
Yeah.
really five different tools, at least individually. And so you're saying, hey, no, no, put it all together into one. And just how do you even broadcast that out to agents and get through
100%.
all the other tools that are also
The
trying to
noise.
broadcast? Yeah.
The noise. Well, that's how we did it, though. That was the irony of it. You're absolutely right. Everybody said, "You're in this super crowded marketplace. You're in this place where there's all these tools exist." And I said, "You're right. But the biggest challenge that every agent has is the ability to put all those tools together in a
Yep.
way that's cohesive, in a way that makes sense, and in a way that all those tools talk to each other. So you're right, there's tons of tools out there, but it's still up to the agent to use them, and it's still up to the agent to interpret them, which is all just time and energy cost. And so they end up not using them to their fullest potential. So again, what I went back to is there's always going to be a marketplace for the tools, right? Always.
Sure.
Like there's always going to be a marketplace for someone to just go get that one tool or that one thing or whatever it might be. But there won't always be a marketplace where somebody actually understands how to put all these pieces together, how to put all these tools together in a way that is simple, usable, and actually works. And
Right.
that is what we went out and did. And so I made a bet, a big one, that this was going to work and that the results would be that would speak for themselves, right? That the agents would show how well it actually worked. Well, the biggest challenge of a model like this is that it works really well when agents use it, but
Sure.
it took people a long time to number one, understand what we do, and number two, get past the number one objection I get asked this all the time. Like, what's the number one objection the agents give you? They all think it's too good to be true.
Sure.
And which says to me that it was from the beginning said to me that it was the right business model and the right plan because agents didn't trust it, which I understand because there's been a lot of bad actors in our industry,
Sure.
right? And so we started to bring agents on and use this, and we made a bet that those agents would win, that those agents' businesses would grow. And that happened. Agents' businesses were growing double, triple, quadruple digit percentages year over year in closed units.
Wow.
Like it's factual. You can go check it on our Instagram and check it in their businesses. It's real. And the way that I solved the problem of lead generation, which is another big question I get asked, is I never generated leads. I just partnered with lead aggregators, right?
Sure.
So one of the big lead aggregators that I partnered with was Ojo Movoto. And so they came to me after a couple years of me really frankly like building and just head down focusing on growing this model, right? Because again, one of the bigger challenges I had is that we were in a great market. I started this in January of 2021. Nobody needed help in January of 2021.
Right.
Nobody needed help in 2022 either, right? Like
Right.
agents were doing well. If you had a pulse and a real estate license, you were having your best year ever, right? And the challenge is, like I said, and what I was saying to the industry, and now makes me look like a prophet, but I'm not. I'm just someone who's experienced it myself. Where I said to all of these agents, I said, you have problems in your business, you just don't see them because success is a bad teacher. And a great market covers up a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And it was, right? And so all these agents, I would say to them, you have a problem and come find me when like the problem reveals itself. If you don't
Yeah.
see it now and you don't trust me now, just come find me when you see it. Unfortunately for you, you're going to be in a lot of pain when you come back, right? But if you don't believe me, that's okay. Like find it out for yourself. And that happened. Like this year, over 50% of the agents that have joined our platform this year are people that we met well over a year ago, which is very interesting,
Yeah.
right? And so anyway, so on that journey in working with lead aggregators, like I said, Ojo and Movoto was one of the first ones that I worked with, and they came to me one day and said, "Hey, something interesting is happening with your organization. Your agents are converting leads better than anybody else, better than
Hmm.
other individual agents, better than other teams that we're working with. Why is that?" And I said, "Well, I think it's because they have again all these this comprehensive support. All these pieces are put together for them, so they don't have to press all the buttons, right? And also because we train them how to do it in a simple way, and because we manage all of the follow up for them, right? They're not responsible for it because." I'm not a big fan in the real estate industry when people talk about, agents aren't successful because they don't lead generate. I don't find that to be true, actually. There's probably nobody in the industry that has a better look into individual agents than I do because I support hundreds of them at a very intimate level. And most of them are actually consistently lead generating, and they do lead generate. For the first 30 days or so, they're really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And
What
then
they
it
do
falls
not
off.
excel at exactly, what they do not excel at is long-term lead follow-up, and that's what we manage for them. And so I said, "Well, I think this is why," and I kinda showed them their system, and they said, "That's really interesting." They said, "Another interesting thing that's happening, though, is that your agents are also getting better reviews than everybody else," right?
Hmm.
In other words, they're giving a better client experience than everybody else. Why is that happening? And I said, "Well, that one's easy because of the support that they have around them, because of the touch systems that are automated for them, both they and their client are having the same experience whether they have one transaction at a time or 10 transactions at a time. And that's what affects individual agents the most is the fluctuations in the business, right?" And so they said, well, what would it look like if we made an even more direct connection to the consumer with these agents? Because again, Ojo and Movoto, their number one goal is to direct consumers to agents, right? Like they want to make these connections and give consumers a great experience and make sure they're working with an agent who's going to do their part because they don't get paid unless the agent gets paid, right?
Yep.
And so that started the conversation of what it would look like for us to partner and eventually led to the acquisition of the Lead Syndicate by Ojo and Movoto. And together we launched Lever by Movoto, which is effectively that same business model now powered by Ojo and Movoto connections at an even deeper, more intimate level.
And so, so Ojo Mavoto, they are the lead gen or lead aggregators. And then tell us what happens. A lead comes into them, and then how does it filter through Lever? Like, how does it filter through your system? What actually happens?
Yeah. So what's really interesting about our platform is that, interestingly enough, only about 50% of our agents even use Ojo and Movoto leads. Like most of them are so busy they don't even want them,
Sure.
and because again we support them comprehensively in
Right.
growing their business. But when they do get those leads, so a consumer gets connected to an agent, and then we're training the agent how to bring that consumer from that phone call to a closed transaction.
Sure.
Because again, it's not a cold lead that they're receiving. This is
No,
usually
it's
a
somebody's
consumer
raised their
who raised
hand.
their hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Who said, "Hey, I found 123 Main Street on the website and I'm interested in it." So we teach them how to work this particular type of lead generation in order to get to conversion, in order to increase the likelihood of conversion, and in order to get to the appointment. And so that's typically the flow. And then what's interesting about what we do, again, because we know that most agents aren't following up long term, is that we then add that person to their, if they don't convert right away, we add that person to their database and put them on a curated sequence of
Sure.
touches over the course of however long the agent is with us, a year, 2 years, 10 years, 100 years, whatever it's going to be, and ensure that they are in front of that person long term, whether the agent does their part or not. So it's funny because we have some agents. We have an agent who's been with us for about 2 years, whose business is literally up 1900% since they joined
Wow.
us. And and what's so funny is that they came to me the other day and said, "I don't think that I would have believed all of these things matter as much as they do if I hadn't seen the compound interest come to fruition in my own business. Like if I hadn't seen all these things happening, because everybody tells you they're important, but most agents don't spend the time to build out all of these systems and
Yeah.
actually have them working for long enough to see the results that they can create. And that's really what we do on their behalf.
Yeah, I'll tell you just how difficult I'm in the process of building. So I recruit realtors for our firm. We have just about 800 agents here, and I'm always recruiting. That's all I do. And so, similarly to how an agent would drip on their client, I'm
Yeah.
doing a similar thing. I am in the process of building out my 12-month. I've actually built it out. It's 12-month touches, and I have 20, I believe, 28 touches scheduled in different ways, not just, all phone calls or emails or texts, but, various different things, items of
Yeah.
value, things we're saying. But I will tell you just, well, because you've built it, it is taking me weeks to build this out. I
Yes.
can't even, I had to hire a developer to help me put it into Zoho correctly in the most efficient way. These are, the average agent isn't going to have time to do. They're just not going to
No.
have time to do it.
They're not. And by the way, the average agent also hasn't gotten to see enough data to really know what works,
Right.
right? Like that's the beauty that we have too, is we have this economies of scale, not only in cost, that therefore we're a far better financial model for most agents, but we also have an economies of scale in information, right? And a team that's smart enough to take all of the information to make better decisions, right? So that's the challenge that we see a lot too, is that most agents, it'll take them years to perfect a touch system because they don't know what to say. It's just one of them trying it on their own clients or their own database of maybe a couple hundred people, and they don't know what converts or not. But
Right.
we see this over the course of millions of consumers because of how many people we support. So
Yeah.
we're
You,
very
you guys
smart
have the
when it
data.
comes to, yeah, when it
Well,
comes to
and I
touch
want to make sure
systems.
we make this point because you said this earlier, but even if whoever somebody's listening and saying, My issue is not leads," because we talked about
Yeah.
Movoto being a lead gen company as well. But you said 50% of the users aren't even using that. They're just using it for their existing databases. So
Yes.
I always say, for our listeners, imagine if you, and again, I'm going through it right now. I know the pain of building out these systems. Um, Imagine if you could touch one of your one of your prospects 20 to 30 times in a year or two, whatever, makes sense. Again, you have all the data of exactly how often and what kind of touches and everything. And just letting someone else kind of do that part of it for so that you could
Yeah,
focus, because we know that we know the number one reason people choose an agent or choose a different agent instead of the one they used before is communication, lack of communication. So if
100%.
that's the main driver for getting more of your sphere to choose you, then let's just solve that. And if that's not something that ever, and look, when an agent's busy, they just can't do all the touches. They just can't.
Yep,
If I mean, they can if you're new to the business, but if you're, anyway, we know how difficult that is. So
100%.
I would love to offset what I am doing right now. I'm sorry, I would love to have a plug and play solution for recruiting that doesn't really exist right now. At least I haven't found a good one yet. And so I know the pain of this. And agents, don't try to build this yourself. You are going to make so much more money by offloading this part of it, because this is the part that takes you away from helping your existing clients. It's also just the easiest thing not to do because it's not part of an existing client request, right? It's like, oh yeah, I got to call so and so and just check in with them. Well, yeah, you probably should, but if you don't have time, what's going out in its place? And
Yeah,
this is really where Lever comes in. But so tell us exactly,
100%.
like, what is Lever? Give us some ideas of, like, okay, I upload my database to
Yeah.
Lever, and then what happens?
Yeah. So I'll just give like a brief, like I said, it's a comprehensive support system. So again, we support the agent comprehensively in coaching and training, database management, marketing, transaction management, and supplemental lead generation. So what that looks like is coaching and training is regular coaching and training with our team, not only to grow you, but to grow your business, to grow scripts, to practice, to do one-on-ones, to do conversion coaching, literally whatever you need. And then you also have access to our database management. So our database management is interesting because a lot of people, when they say database management, it's like, hey, come put your stuff into our database. That's not what we do. We manage the agent's database. So whatever database they're on is what we're managing. And all they need to know how to do is label people, is really how we say it. Like, you have to tell me who I'm talking to. In other words, your example right now is perfect, because the agent that's brand new and just got their license needs a completely different touch system or set of communication than the agent who's trying to grow out a team and struggling, right? Just totally different problems. Well, we understand similarly that the consumer that's your past client or part of your sphere of influence needs a completely different touch system than somebody who is a cold internet lead, right? And so we build curated touch points depending upon who we're talking to. So everybody gets a minimum of 37 touches a year. That's
Wow,
our minimum.
amazing.
And that's the magic number, right? That we found, because again, you're absolutely right in that it's not that they're going with another agent because they like them better or because that agent is better. They're going with another agent because that agent happened to be there when they were ready to go,
Yeah,
right? That's what agents don't understand. I always laugh when someone's like, oh, they ghosted me. I'm like, they didn't ghost you. That's just their way of saying they're not ready right now. They don't
yeah,
need you right now. They don't want to be in constant communication with you. You want to know when I want to talk to my accountant? When I need something, right? Like, I don't want to talk to them every single day.
right.
And so it's similar when we're in the real estate space. Next place that we support them is marketing. And so we have a full service marketing department and really do this on behalf of the agent. So again, what was important to me is that most people get into the real estate business because they want to build their own brand, build their own business, and I believe that's how it should be. So the consumer is really none the wiser that we even exist unless the agent wants them to be, and we are always marketing the agent business. There's no powered by, none of that. It's the
Right,
agent's business.
right.
And so where we start with every agent is we build them a brand guideline. So your logo, your color scheme, how you want to be recognized by the consumer. The way I explain this to every agent is like, you always know the Nike logo because it never changes,
Right.
right? And so yours has to be similar too. And that challenge most agents have is they don't understand that. So like every Canva flyer they're pumping out looks
Right.
different and also takes
Right.
them 4 hours, right? And so we build their brand guideline, and then from that brand guideline we proactively do all their marketing. So just listed, just sold, under contract, listing presentations, buyer presentations, social suites, monthly newsletters, flyers, event marketing, like literally whatever they need. And again, the importance of this comprehensive support is that it's very intuitive. So for example, again, we also manage the agent's transactions, which is transaction coordination, as well as basically having an assistant during the transaction. So we're
Sure.
like scheduling the sign in the yard, we schedule and pay for photos, we're sending out postcards, we're coordinating with clients, getting inspections done, we're putting them on post close plans, getting reviews, things like that. And the importance is that when you get a transaction, what most agents don't realize and where the actual expenditure of time and energy happens is in all the things that have to happen even if you have support typically in a typical environment. Like I'll explain it to an agent when they say, "Well, I could just get an assistant." Like you could, but does your assistant need to be told everything to do? Do they
Right.
know
You
the
have to
systems
train
and
that
build out?
assistant. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what's interesting with us is that when an agent gets a transaction, you don't have to ask us for marketing. We know you need marketing. And so it just automatically happens for you. You don't have to ask us to send it to your database. We know you're going to want to send it to your database. That automatically happens for you. You don't have to ask us to put it out on social media. We know you want to put it out on social media. So all these things are just automatically happening on your behalf. And all under your branding. And then last but not least is the supplemental lead generation. So some of our agents totally access our OJAM Moboto leads if they want to grow. Some of our agents come to us because they want to have a lot of growth in their business and want to add another vertical of lead generation. And then some of them come to us because they just really need support for the business that they have. And so some of the supplemental lead generation support is also supporting however they are lead generating. So playbooks, follow up systems for whatever they do to already lead generate in order to convert at a higher level. So a lot of our agents, the biggest challenge I see in the industry is that agents are constantly looking for the transaction that's right in front of them, right? They're constantly looking for the transaction that's 30 to 60 days out. And that's where all their energy goes. But then all this work that they're doing to find that transaction that's in 30 to 60 days just sort of gets flushed down the drain
Right.
because they don't have any system to keep the
To keep it going.
consistency happening. Exactly. So therefore, they never get the compound interest that they could get. They never feel the experience of that because they're just constantly looking for the next thing. And it just breaks my heart. What I tell every agent is there's a better way. There's a better way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, even if somebody were to automate home anniversary card, postcard, email, text, whatever.
Yeah,
That's a huge victory right there. If someone,
100%.
because you sell somebody a home and then you're like, well, they're probably not going to need me for 7 to 10 years, according to the
Yeah.
statistics. So what am I going to do between now and then? Well, I'll still put them on my monthly newsletter, blah, blah, blah. But what am I really, really doing? How am I really actually staying in touch with them? Newsletter's fine. It's good. It's one piece, but there's a lot of, like you said, you want to really continue to touch people after the transaction. And I don't know if it's still 39 touches every year after a
Probably
transaction,
still 37 touches a year.
or 37, sorry. That is interesting to me. So I am super interested in this. So imagine, guys, uh, men and women, of course. I just say guys because I'm in the Midwest. We say the word guys. Our listeners.
That's why everyone thinks I'm from Texas. I switched to y'all to not offend anyone,
I
and
totally
everyone
thought you
thinks
were
I'm
from
Texas.
Texas when we first
Everybody
started.
does.
I said, "You're in Texas, right?" She goes, "No, no, I'm an LA girl." But anyway, so everyone listening, we think about like putting these 39 touches or 37 touches together. Imagine what that would do to your business. I promise you, if nothing else, you will get a couple more transactions a year, and it will be probably a lot more than that. But at the very minimum, a few extra transactions a year seems
Yeah,
like a no-brainer in whatever the cost of the service is, right? Because if I can automate that part, which is really a lot of sweat equity too, right? It's a lot of just time in front of the computer doing
learning
all
what
of the
works,
yep,
putting it all
a
together.
lot of time in Canva, a lot of time just doing all of these different systems in different systems, running the systems in usually in individual systems, and then letting you guys really take that over is. I wish there was a solution like this for recruiting. So, and I'm sure somebody's
Yeah.
probably building one. Maybe somebody listening to this will think of build one.
Well, you should go solve the problem. You should build if you're building it for you. I think this is what's so interesting about what I've done and how I knew that it was going to work. It's not because I'm not smart or because I'm special. It's because I wanted it, right? Like
Yeah.
our problems never exist in a vacuum. Never.
No.
If it's a problem for you, it's a problem for other people. Like every great business that has ever come forth was because somebody had a problem. And and said to themselves, well, if this is a problem for me, this is probably a problem for other people. And so when everybody said this is never going to work, I'm like, and I said, it will. It's the only reason I knew is because I would have signed up for this. I would have looked at this and been like,
100%.
where do I sign? Because it was everything that I wanted without all the things that I didn't want.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to wrap because everything you wanted without the extra stuff that you don't. It's like getting a CRM and going, "Oh my god, they have 50 amazing features." And then you're like, "But I'm only really going to use 3 of them."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And then
exactly.
you have this weird sort of feeling every time you log in going, "I'm not utilizing this thing enough and I'm just not really this is where you want to offload all of that to someone else and say, you figure it
100%.
out. I've got better things to do, which is usually client facing stuff. If the agent
Yeah,
can spend more time in front of the client, they're going to do much better, and less time
100
doing the back end stuff. So
100%.
I am sold. If any of our audience would like to learn more about Lever, you can go to lever.movoto.com, movoto .com. But and they can also schedule a demo, I believe, as well. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. So you can right from that website, you can schedule a demo. You can also find us like we're easy to find. Find me on Instagram. Say hey, I heard all this and I want to learn more about it. Just at the Nikki Miller. And if you want to schedule a demo, that's a great way to just learn more about what we do. If you want to talk to agents, you want to sit in on one of our development calls, like we are an open book because what we do actually works. So you are
And
welcome to learn all about it.
what I really encourage our audience to do this. What I would do when I'm reaching out to Lever is I would say, hey, here's my main pain points. This is what I don't seem to be doing, or I'm not good at, or it's just taking too much time. Here are the things that, gosh, and forget about the fact that yes, this is going to cost money. Of course it is, but put that aside for a second and just think of the problem. Bring the problem to Lever. Have them come up with a solution that makes financial sense for you, because they clearly know what they're doing. They've got a great track record. If you're coachable, they are extremely useful to you. So reach out to them, lever.movoto.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Let them know that you heard about it here on the Keeping It Real podcast. We appreciate that. Nikki, it was such a pleasure. By the way, also the One Thing podcast, guys, if you're not a Gary Keller fan, you should be. And the One Thing is one of his best works. And of course, the podcast One Thing is amazing. It's an incredible podcast with a lot of listeners. So please check that out anywhere podcasts are served. Lever is the service that you need to be looking at right now. And as the market kind of picks up, this is kind of the time to really start looking, because soon you're going to be too busy to start looking at tools. So
Yep.
let's consider any downtime to be, an opportunity to explore options like Lever. So lever.movoto.com is where you go. I want to thank everyone for sticking around to the end of the episode. I want to thank our guest on behalf of the audience. Nikki, thank you. You are a wonderful addition to this industry. I'm so glad that we were able to showcase this exciting service. I rarely get excited about tech products and services because a lot of it, like you said, a lot of it's noise. It's not as much signal. This is signal to me. This is a really solid offering. Really encourage everybody to check it out. Do a demo. What do you have to lose? And you might just be the solution you need to make this year a little bit more comfortable for you as you do your deals. Also, on behalf of Nikki and myself, thanks to the audience. We appreciate you sticking around. And also, please tell a friend. Think of one other realtor that you know in your office, or somebody that you're friends with that could use this kind of information. Maybe they need to sign up for Lever. So shoot them over a link to this episode. We'd appreciate it. KeepingItReal.com is where you can stream all of our episodes, or any podcast app as well. Really appreciate it. And leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of this episode. And we will see everybody next time. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks for having me.